All right, y'all. We're live. What's going on, everybody? Let me
Hey,
tweet this out and share it on socials. Today, we have AI working through our backlogs. Come hang out with us on the stream.
More
And
MCPs.
I do like a good MCP. Let's share this one out. All
APIs are
right,
so last year. Just
bro. sir. I can tell you right now at the AI Engineer World's Fair Conference in San Francisco, bro, the amount of people that were in the MCP workshop was like people were in the hallway trying to peer through the crack in the door. It was crazy. It was crazy. All right, tweeted this out, shared it on. Come hang out with us. This time. All right, perfect. It is now shared into the internets. All right, perfect. There we go. Okay, so when we say that we're gonna have, well, I guess let's take it back a step. Let's give the premise and explain what it is that we're doing here. So, like, what is our backlog, and what is like our application doing for there to be a backlog for?
we've been building this Clockify MCP to help us with, use AI around kind of our monthly invoicing and time tracking reporting. And so, that's the context of an exercise we're going through, trying to get way more autonomous with AI, right? In a number of the prior streams, we've been adding a bunch of tools and kind of guiding it to go through, and then letting it get a little bit more and more liberal with, okay, let's add a bunch of tools that was suggesting. That was one thing we did last time. We were asking it, like, okay, what are some remaining tools that we should consider adding for this overall task we're trying to do? So it's added a bunch of tools. And now we got to a point where I think we have a number of tools that we actually don't want. Um, so I had it update the backlog document that we have with all the tools, and we identified like about 10 here that we don't want. So I've moved the ones that we would like to not have down to a list of tools to remove, and had it kind of reword the items here to read the action to be remove the tool. So now, it's interesting because this is going to be a backlog of deletion, not creation. But I think the premise is still the same. Like, for each of these items, we're going to need to come up with a plan for removing it. We're not going to want it to remove it by just like removing the no longer register the tool, so it can't be called. All the code is still in there, right? So like we're going to want it to remove the tool and all the code associated with the tool unless it's used by another tool. So like each of these is going to have a process very similar to implementation, right? So you're going to go through and create a plan for removing said tool. You're going to go through and make the changes. You're going to want to review the changes. You're going to want to test things to make sure everything else is still working after it's been removed. That's the specific backlog that we're going to be going through right now. And we're going to see how kind of our journey of building more and more long-running workflows is going. We were talking last time. We've got a few to look at here. Added a couple. Like I got a really basic one, for example, here around like helping me write commits in the way that I think would read well for other people. We've had the end-to-end testing one for a few sessions now, and then we've got a new one here for like implementing a feature or like implementing a ticket. I think we'll use this one when we're going through this backlog. So I think the goal for today is to go through one of these and see how well it goes through one, and then ultimately we want to say, okay, now just go through the rest. Like I don't want to handhold anymore. Like let's just go through it, and I'll check back in with you when you're done.
I like it, especially the fact that we're not having to handhold it. I mean, that obviously just makes life a little bit easier. Okay.
Yeah, I think like for the future of the streams, I think one thing that would be really interesting is to continue to get to a place where okay, for a lot of the day-to-day tasks, like I'm just kicking off kind of jobs effectively, and then checking in on them, make sure they're successful. When they get to a point where it's expected that I'd be reviewing it, let's imagine that's before we merge it right now, like a PR or something like that. I may walk up to a PR that it's opened, it's already reviewed, it's already gone back and forth on feedback, and it's like, okay, I think everything's good, everything I can possibly do is done. Do you want to merge it? So let's say like that's where, for now, we would put a human gate. I think a lot long term, you probably get rid of that human gate eventually, also. But let's say like that's where we're going to keep it for now. So that
We
makes
just
sense.
gotta
Like,
we just got a comment on Twitter. What language is this? Because I'm confused. I'm like, this is just Markdown.
yeah, the language of AI is just
Yeah.
English and Markdown. Okay. Let's see where we're at here. So I think like our directory's clean. Yep. And we've got this backlog good to go. So let's try our first one. So we're still going to handhold a teeny bit here. Let's say.
And for those that aren't familiar, we're using Roo code here. So if you've never seen this tool before, it is ROO code. It's an extension that you can install in VS Code. But essentially, it allows you to bring your API key over. So if you want to use Anthropic, you get an API key from them. And so you just pay based on the calls that you're making instead of something like Cursor where it's a subscription, whether you use those calls or not. And to be honest, we've just ended up becoming quite big fans of the tool as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things that I think Roo code has that some other agents do not have that really enable you to do what we're trying to do right now. That it gets to be rather hard. I'll share one of them here, like with Orchestrator and what Roo code calls boomerang tasks, or like just more commonly may refer to as like subtasks. If I was saying I want to implement this whole backlog in, say, a Cursor, and Cursor said, okay, great. And it starts kind of going across and working one item, then working the next item, then working the next item, then working the next item, and the next one. At some point, like, your context is going to be full. What happens at that point is it's going to try to probably compress it, or it's going to suggest that you start a new task. And so, like, starting a new task would be a complete failure for what we're trying to do, right? Because we wanted to go through the whole backlog. And then, like, on the compressing side, that's a process in which it like summarizes what it's done so far, tries to maybe retain the key instructions from the beginning and kind of summarize the work so far, and be very intentional about where it currently is so it can continue, and basically starts a new task or a new context window with that summary, and continues on. That can work, but it also can run into like a degradation due to the summary maybe having something that's not ideal in it, or when you're summarizing a context when it's full, that is like maybe a point where there's a lot of risk of hallucination because you're at a pretty full context window when you're doing the summary. You can get into like a copy of a copy. So like not having the ability to kick off subtasks with separate context windows can be make things more challenging when you're trying to do really long running threads. Not impossible, but it's certainly a little bit easier, I found, with the subtest feature that Roo code has. And then I think the other thing is like custom modes. Custom modes let you have like different personas. Like we have our end-to-end tester, like exploratory tester mode. And there's a number of rules around that. So like it makes it easy to segregate the rules for different modes and different types of tasks. So like we're going to do this process where it plans out, implements, reviews, and tests. Well, there's a few different modes at play there that we'll see. Like we'll see Orchestrator managing the whole thing. We'll see the tester mode. We'll see like the architect doing the plan, code mode implementing things. We might see like debug. I mean, if the testers, it might pass it to debug to try some things. Each of these modes has like different instructions and different rules that are not active when a different mode is running. So it's like it's protecting the context in that sense, rather than if you had to have all of your rules active all the time, but they only apply to certain modes. Like it doesn't have to be reading the rule and then have some condition in there. Oh, okay, I'm aware of this rule, but it doesn't apply right now. That's just information that's not helpful for it at the time. So let's give this a shot here. So we're gonna ask Orchestrator to come into this backlog, read the tools to remove section, take the first uncompleted item, and then create a new task for that item. And we're gonna have Orchestrator make another task using Orchestrator further to work that item. And we'll say using the implement feature workflow, highlighting there is goofy and messed up, but using the workflow. Let's see what this does. Make sure my modes and everything are good here really quick. I'm just making sure what model profile I have on each of these before we jump in. Okay, that's good. All right, so let's see how this does. I think we're only asking it to do the first item because we want to see it go through once. But like you can imagine, we'd modify this prompt to say, go through, take the first uncompleted item, finish it, and then continue until there's no more uncompleted items. Like is a way we may modify this later. But
do you think we can tell it to like check off items as we go too? Like
sure.
Check the checkbox.
Sure. Let's see.
Like I would, yeah.
When
and we'll make a commit when the subtask is done. So,
but what does mark it complete mean? You should probably highlight what you would want that to look like.
What do you want to say? I mean, I normally wouldn't, but what would you like to do?
Oh, I mean, I would probably put like the bracket, then an X, and then the bracket, so that way it knows this is considered the complete symbol, like it's checked off or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's like by checking the markdown checkbox. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah, I thought I'd sprinkle in a little extras to see how it
razzle dazzle
behaves.
Okay. Here, let's see what razzle dazzle. I almost rarely use this feature, but
refine.
There's this thing down here. I've copied it because I'm probably gonna throw away what it does. But let's see what it would change.
I don't know. Sometimes I get some good responses from that.
Oh, I think almost always you do. All right, so let's see. The updated prompt is read the tool section of it. Put that in quotes. Okay, great. The backlog, identify the first uncompleted task in the list. Create a new task using Orchestrator. Process this item by following the implementation workflow defined in. Okay, yeah. Just a few extra words there. Upon successful completion of the item, update the corresponding checkbox, so it's a little more specific, in the backlog to mark it as complete. Then execute the commit workflow to create a proper commit message with the appropriate message and documentation of the changes made. This is pretty. We'll roll with it.
Let's go with them. See what happens. So found the first one. All right.
Yep. Looks like we're on the right one.
Subtask instructions. Okay.
I understand. We told it to use Orchestrator, but it's using Workflow, which actually is a another custom mode, but it is an orchestrator mode, but it's an orchestrator mode specifically for these bigger workflows, which is probably okay.
Did you just tell it like to behave as if it were an
Workflow doesn't
orchestrator, or-
allow write operations. I need to delegate
Mhm.
this to orchestrator mode. So it identified that and it moved. Okay.
So now it went orchestrator or workflow. And now it's back in another orchestrator. That like workflow hop in the middle probably was not ideal. It's back in workflow now.
I wonder if there's something that's missing in orchestrator that's making it want to jump back to workflow each time.
Yeah, we can look. Well, the workflow mode is a little bit of an experiment that I was messing with, so we may even remove it. And it may even be in a loop. Let's see. What is it trying to do? Implement, workflow file, feature, tool to remove. Yeah. Okay. I don't see what it's trying to do. It's going back and forth. I'm going to stop it and ask it what it's doing here in a second.
Yeah, because I don't even see tokens.
Now
Now just into 28 though.
I need to read the workflow file first to understand this. Excuse me. Read this file. Okay. Hold on. How the workflow understand? I need to execute. Hang on. I need to execute the workflow. Doesn't want to write operations. I'll get this orchestrator back. Huh. Now let's see why orchestrator goes back to workflow.
Execute the implemented feature work.
Okay. Let me look at this real quick. Let's see. Is this call out workflow, or is that just coming from the when to use? Yeah, just the when to use, I think. All right, let's try this. This is in this loop. Let's go into our modes. And let's remove workflow altogether for right now. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was causing it confusion.
Yeah, it's just experimenting. I don't really intend for it to be in here. We'll just have it run. Forget it. Okay. So now when we go over. Okay, great. Let's terminate. We're like buried in tasks now. We got to go way out. Okay. Oh. All right, so let's take this prompt and let's try it again.
When did Rue add this refined prompt functionality? Is that
They've
newer?
always had it. No,
They've always had that. Yeah.
I feel like maybe I've just never looked at that or never tried using it before.
That's why we do these streams, man.
Man, I'm learning something new right here live on stream, y'all.
There you go.
And I use this tool every single day.
I
mean, I have
there.
I have a tendency
Sparkle.
to be like just really fast with my prompts. I just like write one sentence and fire it off. So
That's how I
Oh
am too.
no.
That's how I am.
Oh really? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm the king of long prompts. That's my
Mhm.
thing. I'll take ridiculously long prompts that are well structured and this and that. That's my whole. I don't want to say identity, but it's definitely the thing that I like prioritize a lot when I'm working with AI. Yeah, I probably take way too long making my prompts if I'm being honest, but it's just the thing that I've always found myself doing.
Well, like on these on the work we're doing right now, for example, the prompt is not the work. The work is in the backlog. And then the way it works on this backlog item is going to be a prompt that it generates. Is so I think you're right, Danny, in that like the detail matters here. But I think when you go down this like workflow path, you get to a place where you're not actually writing the prompts anymore. Like you're writing the the process that writes the prompts, and so like the prompt that kicks off that process is actually a pretty lightweight one because it's basically it's like go work the backlog. There's not a lot you have to specify at that point, right? Like when you have it really dialed in on what it means to go work the backlog already, you kind of are just saying like you're almost just hitting the power button. But it ends up being effectively the same thing, right? Because it's going to write like a prompt that's very detailed, so that when Architect does the thing it's doing right now, it's going to give a very detailed prompt to code mode on what to do. So Architect's done. Now it's doing some stuff in code mode. See what it's doing now. Impact assessment and dependency analysis for removing it. We need to safely remove this completely. Yeah, so it's looking at, different dependencies throughout the code. Kind of what you'd expect. This is also a new thing. I don't know if you guys have turned this on yet. And my screen is so big, sorry if you can't see it, but like RuCode is reading a bunch of files at once. Some other agents have had this for a little while, but RuCode did not. I'm very happy to have it now. So like this is like 5 files it read right here, right? Where it's like previously, it would have been like Ru wants to read time tracking, Ru wants to read index, and like each time would have been like a round trip, a tool call. I think it's still in the experimental features, yeah. But turning on concurrent reads speeds it up big time. I'm not running into any issues with it, so I've had it on for a week or two now. This is a new one actually. This must have come out in the last few days. Let's see what this is. When enabled, the temp commission tool will not execute commands. We can try. I'll turn that on later. This is a really old one up here, the power steering thing. I think this is like a little bit of a legacy thing.
I want to try that one sometime. Yeah,
it's not recommended to turn on anymore. I played with it early on. It had see what you find. It had not good results. I think it maybe is only around for like some legacy workflows or something. I don't know. And then this is a newer one that I've not turned on yet, just because there's a number of features you got to bring in here. The things you got to be running to support it. It's not all built in. So
code base indexing, yeah.
I haven't turned that one on yet. All right, let's see where we are now. Oh, we're starting to remove some stuff.
All right, I'm gonna have to drop. I got a meeting.
See you later.
Oh, yeah, man.
Oh, I almost pressed end stream. Whoops.
I'm still here.
There you go.
We're still live.
I think the good thing about this is, these workflows can be long running, but since we're removing, I think I'm hopeful that the individual runs are shorter, so that we can get to like, okay, well, now let's start going through the whole backlog. One thing that we'll get into a little bit that I've been working on around the workflows, we talk about it while we're kind of going through it here, is how you kind of keep a really, really long running workflow going, right? Like and it may be hard to show it, but like the implementation workflow we're going through right now is not super long. 13 steps, but they're kind of meaty steps. They're not like read a file, right? Like, um, and I think the workflow doesn't do things like it's not doing anything like GitHub or Jira or anything like that yet, right? Like it's not opening the PR. It's just doing the working like a local working copy. It's doing a commit at the end there, but like it's not even doing much with source control, right? It's like not creating branches or anything like that. Um, so um, when you start to add all those things in, you get to a place where you're going to get to like dozens of steps. Maybe 100 steps doesn't even seem that crazy when you start pulling in all the aspects of the process. And what ends up happening is it's hard to. It can't load up all 100 steps and say, okay, I'm on step 20 now. Okay, on step 21. Like, and so it's just like more meta thinking of like, okay, you know how we did the backlog where we said just go grab the next incomplete item and work it. When we started that session and in the context window, it doesn't know what the backlog is. We told it where to find the backlog and like where to read, find the next uncompleted item. So it's not trying to hold the backlog in its memory. So I think this way of thinking is going to be critical to doing really broad, longer term workflows.
Right.
Because we'll change the way it works on this implementation workflow to be rather than like follow the workflow as a definition. Like, the thing you do is you create a copy of the template for the task you're doing, and then as you go through, you're going to check off the items, and your task is to just get the next incomplete item and work it, and it turns into like just a while loop of like, where do I find the next thing I need to do? Okay, let me go read it and go do it. And that's what it's got in its memory, not the whole idea of what you're doing.
And there to win it did the remove, analyze time gaps task, and it checked the box and said it's done.
Now
Oh, was that you?
No, it's not me. But we don't have a commit yet, I don't believe.
And it's moving on to the next task. I've had this problem with orchestrator mode before, Elliot. I've like tried this behavior of breaking things up into tasks and giving a massive markdown file to orchestrator mode and telling it like every time you're done with a task, make sure you commit. And it doesn't always respect it the way that I feel like it should. Like, because I want now that it checked that box and it removed that, I would expect to commit just in case we get too far down the chain. We could walk back if we needed to.
I think it actually just checked this way too early. I think it's still like in its workflow. I feel like it checked this off when like some meaningful part of the implementation was done. Oh, what is it doing right now? It's doing something risky, I think.
G timeout. So,
Okay.
Server startup test completed. So, maybe it's just doing some like a little vigilance on ensuring that the server still operates. We just deleted like a bunch of code, right? So,
yep. So it's doing testing. That's what I mean. Like, I think it's still on
Fair.
this item, but for some reason it's marked it off. It's very interesting. It has some specific stuff in here about like you cannot start a long running process because it will hang. Because this is supposed to be an unintended thing. Like, we're sitting here watching it, right? But like, if this thing at any point stops and wants my input, that's a failure. Because for the next phase, when we say go implement the whole backlog, we want to like walk away, or ideally we want this thing running like in a cloud container or in a local container, and like I'm going off and I'm doing some other work, like I'm not paying attention to it anymore, and I'll wait for the notification, or I'll wait until I'm done with something else I'm doing and I'll check back on it and see where it's at for a review or something like that.
Right. Verified the build. Everything. Okay. So.
All right. So
okay.
try
So
to make a commit now.
Yep, it's going to make a commit message. I guess then like the instruction we did kind of instruct orchestrator mode when you're done with the task that is like the work we told you to do to check the box off. But really, we could have been. I mean, that's classic like junior developer behavior. It's like I did what you told me to, and it's like, well, I don't really mean that you're done until you verified the server still runs. You've ensured the test, everything is okay. So it went through some like quality checks on itself before it decided to fully make the commit. Which
and we can make it step 14 to do a commit here too, because I don't want to have to put that in the message.
I mean, definitely like the for long-running task, I could see a couple different approaches. I mean, like doing a commit, like breaking a long-running task into 15 individual steps and doing a commit after every single one so I can get 15 commits. I see that as being useful. Another approach, too, could be like not like commits that are one on top of another, but if like all the tasks aren't interdependent or like if they don't build on top of another one, we could just like check out a bunch of branches, too. So I can check that branch and be like, okay, that, step 13 kind of failed, but 1 through 5 was pretty great. Version control.
I really like that this little commit workflow I did. So I had it make this commit workflow, and I pointed it at like conventionalcommits.org or whatever.
Right.
For how to do it. And now that I have like a workflow, it's a lot. There's more detail to it because I just want to say make a commit. I do not want like
same. Yeah.
And I don't want to have a prompt off to the side that I copy and paste when I do a commit. Like I just want to have the thought, okay, do a commit, and I wanted to know what I mean by that because I mean something way more complex than what it looks like on the surface, right? But like, so now that I have that workflow, that's kind of what I get. So like, for example, we modified the modes to remove workflow, but it intentionally did not include that in the commit it did, which I think is great. So that remains here, and it did. Let's look at the commit it made.
So like, what mode do you think? When it goes to like default, when it goes to like make a commit, is that something that should be like its own mode, or just something that like any mode can do? And it's just like, we could take like those guidelines about how to commit to Git and put them into like a generic rule that exists like globally in your system, so no matter what project you're working on. If you're expecting, because my rules about commits are pretty similar across no matter what project I'm on. I do the same style. Yeah,
you could do a mode. It's going to use code mode probably. If you don't have a mode that's more specific for it.
Code mode, yeah.
So it's just handing this workflow, this commit workflow to code mode right now. But you completely could make this into like a rule and have like a mode for like Git operations. Like if you wanted to have like rules around how you name branches and how you do commits, and like how you do merges and stuff like that. Like you could make a mode that was specifically like, your source control mode. If you like had fancy, like, Git bisect for debugging or something like that going on, like it seems like you'd start to want.
I've got all my little, coding agent modes configured with the same rule, which is that, I like my commit messages to have, a 72 character line maximum top line message. And then in the body, normally as a human, I'm not like super descriptive about like a bunch of bullets inside that body.
Totally not.
With AI, especially, man, like if you're doing a long running task with orchestrator mode, I want to be able to open those commits. I'll look inside of them, and it does a pretty good job. I've said like write in bullets everything you did. And then I'll talk with you a little bit about this too, but I like to add a co-authorship flag to commits that are generated by AI, which is like a cute little bit of functionality. That's like signal to devs that like, I used AI to do this, but
yeah, I hear you on that.
Yeah, this is a nice commit message right here. This is
the thing you got to look out for though, with when you start having it do commits is, it knows its memory of the changes it made. And sometimes changes are not relative to the previous state, like the previous commit. Sometimes changes were relative to changes, and those don't net out in the end. So, like let's say I created something, and then I deleted it. Well, on my commit, that thing I created and deleted is not there because it wasn't there prior. Like let's say I created a file and then when it went to review, it said, "Oh, you don't need that file," and so it deleted that file. It might note that on the commit message that like, "Oh, I removed this file," but it's not anywhere in the commit. So I think like that's something that I noted when it was making this workflow, because I've seen it do this before. Is like
Right.
we care about the changes relative to the previous commit, not like the inner
I've
workings of how you went through the task.
Yeah, like I've run into the same problem, right? Where I tell, my coding agent to commit the work that it's done. And yeah, like it builds the commit message based on like the conversation that I had with it. And I've gotten a little bit more success out of telling it, build the commit message, but use the git diff command to get the diff of changes and then just describe those changes only. Like it's a more verbose rule because I have to really like bob and weave to explain what I mean. But it's like, what I mean is look at your diff, don't forget about the code that you wrote and then threw away and then tried this and didn't do that,
exactly,
or you ping pong activities that you did. Just look at the final work that you did, look at the diff, ingest that with zero context, and then just, write down what it is that's going on. Or maybe like keep the context, in your head, but just, like just use git diff to get the changes.
Yeah, that's important because it has all the memories. Like, well, depending on what context window you're in at the time, but it's going to have potentially memories from the task that's been working.
Definitely. I mean, especially when you describe the work that you've done. Like, I mean, if you told that to a junior developer, they would probably make that mistake.
On to the next one. Look, I think it's let's see. Yes, so it's a little overzealous. It's already started the next one. I don't know that I'm going to complain right now because I think it made a commit. Here we can let's
open up let's open up the Git panel here in VS Code. We can take a look at it.
Sure. You want to look at the commit?
Oh, you're a terminal. You're a terminal.
We can look over here.
I got you.
Want.
Sometimes I use this. I'm more terminal friendly. I think you got to go to the other one though. This is Git Lens.
That's more terminal friendly. So you tell me where you want to go here, because I don't ever use this.
Nah, let's just use the terminal, man. Let's just use the terminal.
Okay, yeah, I like that.
Well, what popped up? What I expected to pop up didn't come up. It's interesting, but
you want this kind of stuff?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I don't have the Git page run, so we can look, or I'll just scroll. Let's get coloring. It'll be easier. I don't know what you're looking for here. I see a lot of deleting.
Yep. That's kind of what I'm. Yeah. I'm looking for. It's like zoom out, squint your eyes. I shouldn't be seeing a lot of green.
So
time gap analysis should have a majority of the changes. Gap detection. It makes sense that time gap analysis would, impact the gap detection.
Those two files
code
are gone, I believe. Yeah. Okay. So the main thing
Yep.
Let's just let it keep going. The one thing it didn't, I don't believe it did, that would give me a lot of confidence is run through that end-to-end test flow after it removed. I saw it ran some of the like integration tests and things. And he created a few artifacts that I don't know that I love.
Few extras.
Like, let's see what this is. Let's go back. This it removes. This was I don't think it created this for the other one, right? I don't see it. See how it goes. I think something that I want the workflows to do. Now let's see. I think it's in the workflow itself. Let's look. something I wanted to do is this idea of like final quality gate, sure. Okay. Typos. It's not in here, but I want to add in like I've had this in some other workflows that are similar that I've done. I want to have like a lessons learned. I want to have like a retrospective. I mean, it sounds goofy, but I don't really care for it to pat its back on things that went well. But I do want it to make suggestions for improvement.
Right.
Because I kind of want it to be a little bit like self-improving. And so like we're going through this backlog, right? I'd like each workflow to have like an artifact, like each run of the workflow to have an artifact that it puts in plans or somewhere with kind of like the end result, and like here's some improvements that I'd recommend.
Right.
Because at the end of going through that backlog, what I want to do is I want to have another task that looks at all those retros and like tells me what recurring improvements there are, or like improvements that seem high priority, and then I want to consider those.
Right.
All right, it's building. Oh, see, this is going to be a problem if it does this. Yep. It goofed. You see what it did? Stuck. We won't
Trying
get
to
out of
build
this.
its own built file.
No, it tried to run the server. It just started the server. Now the server's running. The server runs, so it stopped. It didn't do this the first time around, but it did it this time around. I think since I've said that, it can start another terminal now and kill the other one. But before interacting with it, it didn't have an ability to do that. But see, like what I did just right there, like it would spit that out in like the opportunities for improvement. Like it generally will remember the time it's like that if you work in a certain way, and so
Right.
if you're gonna try to make these things like 1% better each time, whenever it fails, just in the same way like you might make add an automated test whenever you get a bug kind of thing. You want to be noting whenever you've had to get involved with it. Because like again, like ultimately I don't want to be in VS Code watching this window. I want to have said I've got a backlog prepared that we've been working on. Like my PRD is done. Like here are the things I want to have. Go do it. And then I can work on, another backlog or another project, another task, and let that thing run. And so
it's output. Working tools.
this is like a key point. We haven't really reviewed like the steps of the workflow too much, but it's in a really key point right here. Like, so it planned out a task and then it worked the task, and then, it ran tests and did linting and all that. Great. But now it's in a step where it's going back and it's going to review, like it's doing its own code review now, in a sense. Like it's saying, okay, let's look at the changes. Let me go and look back at the plan that was created early on.
Right.
And let me look at the changes. Do the changes line up with the plan? Do I have any feedback on the changes? Let's see what it says here. It wants a confidence rating on the feedback, so it's like high, medium, low here. You could do other means, but it's kind of basic one. And it knows that like anything high, it says must be acted on, medium should be acted on, and then low is like allow it to decide. So when it passes the feedback back, that's kind of the instructions of how it needs to handle the feedback. Let's see what it's looking for here. This mechanic, I think, is super powerful for getting better results, because at times it might do something that's haywire. That could have been something that was wrong with the plan originally. There's a review step on the plan, and there's a review step on the implementation. So like this review mechanic, I think is huge for getting better results than trying to, like, yes, try to make your prompts better. But you'll get diminishing returns at some point. Like adding a review step is a big deal. So like whenever you're having it do anything that's like meaningful, if I say like go run npm lint, I don't need a review step on that probably. But when you're saying like create a whole plan or like do a whole implementation, you got to have a review on that. And AI has its own reasons, but at a base fundamental level, it's the same reason why you'd have a review on something that somebody on your team did. That's why you have that as part of your process already.
It mentally does what I do on a regular basis whenever I look at, a coworker's code submission. I just kind of find it funny that we're back in the same space, kind of like rehashing the same code practices that have been drilled into developers for years now, which is, and AI benefits from these same things. So, having the automated tests, that's pretty huge. This project has been kind of fun to do this whole thing where like the AI kind of tests the implementation itself, since it is like a consumer of the MCP.
Mm-hmm. It's doing it now, actually.
Yeah. It just runs
it's in
it.
Tester mode. It's about to do the end-to-end test, I think.
Like it's connecting. To a certain degree, though, I still feel like we could benefit some from having like some traditional structured unit tests. But it's been really fun. Kind of like I find that the tests that are absolutely the most impactful in like our table stake to have are like these integration type tests. And when you have an integration test, you need to have a client involved. With like even like if you're building a simple REST API, you end up mocking out more or less like a consumer or some form of client.
Like. I don't know. Is it a hot take to say that I don't love unit tests anymore? I used to. That doesn't mean I don't do them ever, but I don't subscribe to the 100% unit test coverage anymore.
I could be persuaded more towards that direction now that we do have AI and we do have the ability to like write unit tests really quickly in a really trivial way.
Well, that actually would persuade me in the other direction. I'd say like I'd put up with it, but when as doing as humans, I almost refuse to put up with unit testing, like very, there's like code that is like just like plumbing. It has like almost no logic, no branches to it, and it's just like plumbing. Like, and if I'm going to have a smoke test that uses that code, like I don't want a unit test on that code. At least
I would just prefer to call the top level thing that's going to call that plumbing code. And that's kind of why I'm back with like the integration test or kind of like the table stakes thing. Like I write an API endpoint. I want to test the post data to it, and then I'm going to expect the results that come out are like this. And I really could not care less about testing that really special function that like converts HTML to Markdown or whatever. something that's just like under the covers that, gets run anyway as a byproduct of my integration test.
Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting having AI do it. Like, I don't know how much I trust that it's running the same test every time. And if it's like, at some point you get tests that are of quality where you very much like it, and then you kind of want to lock it in.
Oh, I agree with that completely. Like this exploratory thing we're doing is like, I think it's really interesting.
It is, yeah.
And I think it's useful from an exploratory standpoint, but like it's not useful for like regression testing unless it's created a script.
I mean, I can foresee like a deeper level. I mean, I could foresee like a deeper level of prompting. I mean, you and I have kind of talked about this idea of like, when are we headed towards a direction of people like creating programming languages specifically for LLMs? And there is kind of like now, I mean, we're kind of tiptoeing in that space, right? We've got markdown files that have XML tags inside of them. Maybe like a little bit more structure would kind of like raise my confidence up some, knowing that like the LLM is running those tests appropriately, where I just go like, here's like the test prompt with like some highly structured things of like what you should do and what the expectation should be. And it's just like, I'm not saying that a human needs to write that and know that it's like 100%. I'm just saying that if an LLM decides that a test is valid to happen inside of a system,
right,
I do kind of want it like solidified in a space,
Right. Well, what we're doing, I think, is kind of unique to this like MCP thing too, where like the agent running is an MCP client.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to have to actually code that MCP client to like to make that end-to-end test suite. You're going to have to like code the client into the test suite, which would be fine. And then you have like a more rigid suite. I would say the point of what we're doing here is not to work against that. It's more just like, hey, this was an interesting thing because we're in a situation where it has its own client built in. So like, let's see what that does.
I mean, I like doing experimental stuff like this. I mean, you have to be able to understand like where the gaps are in the tools so that you can build stuff out, because only by trying this out would I even think that, maybe some standardized way to, I mean, like the idea of an LLM running tests for you is definitely really intriguing. But I can see people showing up and poking holes in it, and that's fine. They're like, what do you mean? You're literally spending money to write tests, Brandon. You could just like write code and run the test locally in your machine using expect statements. And like, yeah, I get that. But I mean, we're here to experiment with stuff. In production systems, I wouldn't do this right now. Yes, I would agree that
or
it
at least
get
not
pricey, totally.
Not as your main thing, like, right? Like,
but I mean, I don't know. It opens up, I think it just opens up interesting conversations and interesting thought patterns and like other ways to use these LLMs apart from what everyone seems to be using them for in the software engineering world, which is just generating code. This thing is like performing actions. Verifying MCPs is interesting because I really kind of feel like with MCPs, like the bubble could just start to grow at a speed faster than we've ever seen before, with like the amount of MCPs that are getting built out there, because the LLMs understand them and they can build it for themselves. And to a certain point, like they may even get robust enough to know, you want me to access this system? Well, an MCP doesn't exist for that yet, but like API documentation does. So I'm just going to make one here really quick on the fly.
Have you play with this at some point? I have it turned off because I don't use it, but
to build a new custom MCP server.
That's what this is.
Help reduce API token costs to disable. Yep. I mean, I think that's kind of what we're going to be seeing, that is, and then it's like, if an agent makes an MCP that's really valuable, there's some shared repository that it could go to and they can be pulled down, and MCPs don't have to necessarily also be run like in a server in the cloud where you connect to them. If you just like had the code to run the MCP, the LLM could pull it down and run it inside of its own little space that it has.
Look at this. It's like it's listening. I'm very curious how it came to this, but I thought I had this in the workflow at one point, but when I went to look for it, I couldn't find it. Let's see. Oh, no, it is in the workflow. Where is it in this workflow? Okay, step 7. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So maybe it's doing this because it has something. Interesting. Oh, and look, here's the commit too. We gotta look back at this. I think the order on this needs to be tweaked. Okay. Let's see what it put in here. It's a lot of status. We want like
So it's going through the process of making a commit now, right?
uh-huh.
Yeah, it's kind of decided to only commit like a subsection of the
Look at
work.
So here's some interesting things. It says I can only do one workflow at a time. That's one of the things that it's noted is I can't work in parallel. Okay, yeah, that would be great to have more of that. Okay, some repetitive validation. Okay, that's like always. That's always like finding the right balance, right? Because like you don't want to straddle the line where sometimes issues come through. So okay. That wasn't a lot of like really meaningful suggestions though. Some small stuff. Okay. This is probably a good one. Like we were saying, we maybe would need to rearrange some of his workflow steps. And doing comprehensive testing. Yeah. Okay. Oh, look, it agrees with you. Some scripts for validation. We don't have the ability to run things in parallel like this, so we're stuck with what we got for now with that. Okay. The main thing is like we got to tell it to remove a lot of this, like, you know, what we don't care to see is like things like this, like, okay, great, we can remove lines and stuff like that, or like look at this implementation success rate 100%. Like Claude loves to do this stuff. Quality hit pass rate 100%. Like
it really
this is like just cannon fodder on what really needs to be. I want a lessons learned document. I want to know the things that went wrong and the things that we should consider changing, because later I want to scan those documents to look for ways to improve the workflow definition. And having all this other stuff in here, it's just going to cloud that whole process when I do it. It's going to be reading these types of lines, which are not meaningful. It's just going to water.
Yeah, it's really just overly positive. You know, I mean, even most engineering brains are like a little bit more pessimistic than that. You know, I find it interesting how quickly, you know, if I ask LLMs for results or any kind of metric like that, it's really quick to be like 100% successful coverage. You know, I mean.
Look at this.
The suggest time entry tool removal represents an exemplary implementation of our structured workflow approach. It's the like, I think this is a reflection of the thing that people have been talking about just recently with like the new models that have come out where they're like, it compliments me way too much. Like calm down, Claude, you know, 5 stars overall, you know, I mean, it's yeah, you know, I really try to think when I'm working with these agents. I'm trying to imagine I'm working with a human, and if someone hit me up with that, I would be like, man, you think a lot of yourself. You really think a lot of yourself. Like,
Yeah, you add this
come on,
in your pull requests now.
I mean, I would give this person. I mean, like, if a junior dev sent this to me, I would show up to their desk and give them like a serious like awakening, because I don't even think my stuff is 5 stars. So,
all right, looks like they've found some errors in testing this time. We'll see how it recovers. Returning to step 3. All right, look, we've orchestrator's chosen debug mode here, so that's great.
so what's unique about debug mode apart from code mode? This is a mode I never use. I never use debug mode.
So when it switches here, we'll be able to go over here and look. So it's got, it's a different mode, so it's got a little bit of different thing, right? Like, and then it's got some specific instructions down here.
It's interesting. There's nothing filled in the when to use section. Like, how does the orchestrator even know to pull it?
This is a built-in mode, so I don't know if they have a different thing going on, but
yeah, it's like a little
point. So you see here, it's telling it to think about more than one way to solve the problem. And then the other thing is code mode, is usually a low temperature. I have debug mode set with a rather higher temperature and a reasoning setting on, which is going to help it with this creativity of like thinking through different paths. So I think that's the main difference. I mean, they're very similar modes in that they both modify code. They have like all the same tools and stuff turned on. But debug, I don't want debug to come in and try to think the same solution that code was trying to do, right? Like that it's not going to work. Like we got whatever your first thought was didn't work. So you got to think of some others.
Right.
But this kind of situation can be a little bit like arduous, right? Like, okay, it went and made some changes, then it tested, found some errors, and now it's got to go back and work on some things for a while. That can ping pong back and forth a little bit and until it finds its way out. Now look, it's still gonna, after it gets everything working, it's still gonna go and review it. So like if the way it solves these problems right now ends up being like super hacky or code smelly, like the reviewer is gonna see that and it's gonna send it back to improve that further. So that process can like bounce around for a little while, which again is why I think the end game here is not to be sitting here like we're doing right now watching. I mean, we're talking over it and monitoring it, but you want to get it dialed in and you want to move on to something else.
Yeah, I see that. Test cases here, should validate parameter correctly. Like that's kind of an interesting, very open-ended like expectation parameter there.
Yeah, let's see what this is right here. Is this trying to drive the tester, the test mode when it's doing it? I think it is, because these are obviously not executable cases.
Yeah, like it's like some kind of JSON structure that's meant to like inform the testing. Like it's kind of on. It's sort of thinking. I feel like it's kind of thinking the thing that I'm thinking a little bit, which is like, if I'm going to be running these tests, I need this like structured way to ensure that it's right every single time. But like the expectations are still like very open-ended. It's kind of like it should be correct. It's kind of like the test that I see.
Oh yeah, look what this is going to do. This it's off the reservation here for sure. We'll see what it does though. I think it'll find its way.
I mean, I see humans make these exact same mistakes though when they write test cases. Like it's funny that the LLM writing its own test case is making a similar mistake that I would see a junior dev make, which is, I'm going to test that I'm going to test some API endpoint, and all they do is they expect response to not be null, and they're done with the test.
Or like
You know, and it's
200,
like,
the classic.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
give me
just
200.
yeah, it's like expect 200, and it's like no, 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 no. Like you need to dig so much deeper. So like it's doing this kind of unprompted. We haven't seeded it with like any specific direction, but I'm pretty sure we could probably nudge it if we wanted to. We could nudge this like whole testing practice more into like don't just check for general success or whatever. Check for some specifics, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to see where it goes. But
Yeah.
Look at this. It's going to be like spawning.
Spawn its own, so it's going to
This
start
is
like
a
the build
server.
server,
So
start the server.
it's
Yeah.
kind of like coded its own MCP client now. So like if it was going to go to this extent, I would
Yeah.
prefer it didn't do this at all and it just used the tester mode.
I mean, this is yeah.
But may work. But this is a lot to create all.
I mean,
this,
it's like if
this just for debugging this one problem, right? Like,
yeah, if you're going to do this, you might as well just like pick up a testing library or something.
Yeah, it doesn't have any direction to like be so artisan.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's like the original sin here was some of these integration tests were just scripts to call APIs, because one of the first things that it like ran into was like an issue with some of the Clockify API calls, and that there's like some things that weren't in these docs that it was running into.
Right.
And so it like made a bunch of scripts to do like a ton of API calls, basically just like, curl type tests and trying to figure out how to integrate with that API. And it just made all those by hand. It was just like, writing fetch calls and figuring out how to do that API, and it wrote like hundreds of those trying to figure it out. And I think from there on, it's been like referencing these, and it's just kind of like kept that same pattern. And we haven't taken time to correct it. I think that's where it's getting all that from, because there's nothing in there about like don't bring in testing library or don't bring in packages or anything like that. I think we've yet to ask it to like review how it's doing testing and make suggestions, or just directly say do it like this instead of like that.
I feel like this is something that's just been emergent only out of this project. I mean, I've never, only because we're building an MCP are we able to kind of just be like, hey agent, and just test to make sure that this MCP works right, but don't write code, just call the MCP directly. It's like created
worked. This was the out, which is that what it wanted? Seems like that's what it wanted. Let's see where it's at.
Are we still using Claude for the majority of the work here?
All these are on Claude.
Mm-hmm.
They're all on Claude 4. Some of the profiles for some of the modes have reasoning turned on, and architect, ask, debug, and tester all have higher temperatures. Tester has 1.0. I think architect, ask, and debug have 0.75. And then the 4 of those also have reasoning turned on. I think the same amount of reasoning. I don't think it's
yeah, that's kind of like another interesting use of like modes in Rue. I kind of like that, the idea of like architect mode, the temperature should be a little bit higher, which means it can be more creative with what it wants to do. But code mode, I want to put the temperature to 0. I don't want it to be creative at all. Yeah. When you're in code mode, I want you following the plan. We were all, there was a moment for us to be creative. That time is over now. Now it's time to execute and implement.
Yeah, I mean it's all non-deterministic, I guess, with LMs, but like you want it to be more towards the deterministic side versus less.
I mean, are engineers deterministic though? Like Elliot, if you gave me something, if you gave me a problem to solve and then you gave me the exact same problem solved 2 weeks later,
perfect robot.
I'm being cute.
Here's the setting in here. Use custom temperature.
Is this something that you can configure in Claude? Like, can you get into Claude like for desktop and configure its temperature? Or is this something like just specific to like agents that are integrated in this manner?
Because I guess this is not a setting in Claude desktop, but let's look.
Yeah, I've never tried to like do something like this in Claude desktop. Because like I'm kind of assuming what this configuration is doing is like, because when you write prompts in Rue, Root takes that prompt and it adds even more stuff. It kind of rewrites it. There's like an intermediary step that goes on and expands things out, and then it tacks additional stuff on to like adhere to the modes and all the stuff that you've defined. So I'm kind of wondering if
tool
that
definitions
is
and all that kind of stuff in there.
Yes. So I'm wondering if it's just adding a secret coded phrase to your prompt to be like.
It's part of the API call to the model.
Okay, so it's actually metadata we can attach into the API call. Interesting that Claude has decided not to.
Claude is a very
turn that on.
User facing.
Yeah, like that may be a little. I mean, that's why I like Rue. Is it just feels like it's for professionals, and Claude kind of feel like the Claude desktop tool. I like it, but it still feels a little.
That's like this
too consumery.
It's this Claude. The application Claude is Anthropic's ChatGPT. Yeah. Let's see where we are. I saw perfect before it scrolled quickly. I guess that means it's feeling good.
I wonder what it's doing to like restart. Where are those notifications coming from?
This is from VS Code.
But is it Rue triggering that? Because I don't think I've ever.
There's not a way that you can trigger that programmatically. I don't believe, because I've looked. But the way this works is, right, like we're trying to test the thing we're building right here in this configuration, and so there is there's a setting in here to watch and restart.
Okay.
So like as we modify this thing, we need it to, if it's going to reach out to test this, it needs to test the latest. So it's pointed at the build directory. Like as we rebuild or do anything in that directory, at least to this main file, I guess the watch could be like all the files in this directory. If you wanted to be a little bit better, but that's what's going on there. And there's some like goofiness with how this works. There might be some bug with the path. Like if I don't have this / here, if I just do build without anything in front of it, it doesn't work properly right now. So if you're playing with this and trying to get this to work well, mess around with this. And it's actually supposed to, it is per documentation supposed to be able to just say build / index right here. And you don't even need this, but that does not work right now at all. So like this file is very local to my machine now because of that. So I can't put this in source control if we're working on a team. Whereas if you're just having, build / that would be fine for everybody. But that's what that is. So that way, if it goes in and tries to do tests, it's
right,
testing the current.
Oh man, so remind me again what task we're working on. Sometimes I like kind of lose track of like where we're at, like in our backlog.
We're on the second one. Suggest time entries. It removed it, and then a bunch of tests failed after the removing was done.
Right.
I really want to know what this thinks it's doing right here.
Yeah, I'm wondering the same thing to myself. It's like all caps, and it's very excited about that. About that resolution that it just stayed. Very pumped. Holy cow.
Yeah, so I think in like in future streams we're probably definitely going to get to like probably bust out of Recode and move over into um
I'm kind of thinking about this like user interface that can exist on top of this MCP that can provide like visuals. If
mhm,
there was some way that we could have the agent educated about how to use Google Charts or whatever our favorite charting library or visualization library is, or
okay,
no library at all. I mean,
okay,
a lot of visualization libraries exist because for humans. So, I mean, maybe you can just do it in D3 or just straight up make an SVG. But I would love for there to be like a chatbot at the bottom, and it's like generating some visuals for me. Because anytime I'm dealing with like
mm,
um, anything regarding my finances, like even I mean personal finances, the business finances, like pie
mm,
charts, bar graphs, things of that nature are. I have a geometric brain. You know, I
mm,
like to see those visuals. Helps to give you like insight into like, you know, how much time was spent on task XYZ compared to
mhm,
everything else.
mhm.
So
Okay, so we'll see how good its tests were. We know there were some fluff tests in there. We'll see what happens when it goes in the, the intent test would go through. That's what it's doing now.
I'm curious too, you know, maybe like another fun thing to hook up to this would be some kind of like Grafana connector, and we could
Mm.
like chat right inside of Rue. Hey, make me a Grafana dashboard, use these tools, you know, I mean,
Oh,
somehow.
that could be cool.
I mean, the tools are mainly meant for getting like static data, but it's I'm always trying to figure out how I can add a visual flair. Grafana is a really great tool because it just kind of gives you like a nice space, like throw graphs. You don't need to make a whole website and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So
Mm-hmm. As soon as like very quickly after we get like this workflow at this level working, um, I'm gonna be like dying to make it work in the background. And so, you know, Rue doesn't do that. So
mhm,
we might break out and use some of the CLI based tools
mhm.
with all the modes and prompts like that we got from that we can bring with us from our work here in Root Code. Um, and we may try to maybe vibe code our own agent
Yeah,
that
I'm
works in the
kind of
CLI with like Claude Code or something.
yeah.
Because I want to be able to create jobs and I want to be able to monitor the jobs.
And I mean, what are those jobs going to do? Further build out the MPC or utilize it?
Um, yeah, like run through these workflows at that point. So like you implement changes. At some point, we're going to try to build another thing. Like we got to build a QuickBooks MCP. So I think we'd use that agent to build QuickBooks one day, maybe.
QuickBooks MCP. Let's see. Nope, I don't see any QuickBooks MCP out there right now.
I'm not surprised at all. I think MCPs are like a still very popular. Like they're very popular in like the development world. I don't think they're like popular yet out in like the user facing world. All right, look, the intent testing passed. So I don't know if there's, you know, regardless of whatever that fluff test was in there, it's good.
Well, I mean, I did find one. I mean, I just kind of stumbled across this website called mcp.so.
Oh yeah,
Connect the
sure.
world with MCP. I'm just learning about this right here live on stream for the first time ever, man. I
I
did
am
not know this
super.
existed.
I am crazy anti third party MCPs,
Hmm.
especially for
Just
uh,
made by randos, you're saying? Like,
hooking it up to my QuickBooks instance.
yeah, man, I would be a little scared of that. I'm not gonna lie. That's a little too close to the bank account for me. But like, you know, what I'm kind of thinking with this is like something that I would want to use this for is I want to connect Slack
Oh
to
yeah.
this bot, and I want to type in Slack, hey, produce a Grafana dashboard or whatever kind of visualization dashboard we pick. Produce one for me at the end of every single week. Send it to me Friday at 4
Okay, so
o'clock.
you want to
And
move
these
your
are the things I
agent.
care
You
about.
want to move your agent to Slack, and so
Well,
you know you're on your
yeah,
phone.
that's how
I'm on my phone and I'm vibe coding now.
here's kind of the use case that I want, right? I run a company and I don't have a financial assistant, right? but
Yeah.
I want to have like insights into things that are going on, but I want to talk to something as if it were my financial assistant, right? Like
yeah, totally.
the mechanics and all those things. So I do kind of want to post in Slack, like, we got a new project. It's this, we're worried about it. Or this project just turned red. I'm concerned. Like, I see a lot of companies, they have projects and everyone kind of does the same thing where they rate the success or how things are going on red, yellow, green.
Mm-hmm.
So, every week or throughout the week or constantly, like every Friday at the end of the day, at the end of the week, right, it sends me the report. But throughout the week, I kind of seed it with things like, I'm a little worried about this task, or just generate something for me like right out of the gate. Maybe like through some nice connectors, we could get a type of experience where, like, I mean, in Slack, it could respond with what the report is, so it's the big point being, I want it to take very loose, open-ended feedback that I am just screaming at it. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a little worried about this project, include it, in the report at the end of the week. It's like a top line item. I'm just making stuff up right now, but if I wanted to instead like do all that myself and like show my team at the end of the week, hey, here are the projects that are like starting to go way over the estimate that we thought they were going to be. It's a pretty mechanical task, right? For me to get in and open it up, move things around. So I'm trying to think like how I can make that trivial, right? So I could definitely see like, I mean, Slack is just where I live. So I can see that being used in tandem with this MCP. If we have them all running, if it's like, if all these tools are running on a server somewhere, Slackbot connected, it just, you kind of treat Slack as like, where you send the prompt to, right? Or maybe even crazier, you could have the bot open and listening to like your sales team all the time. And it just decides how it wants to modify its report. It doesn't take instructions anymore. It makes its own decisions. So I don't know if we're at that point yet. A little bit
All right,
further
we're done
out.
with the second tool. It's starting the third. We got 2 commits here.
And I mean, we haven't been typing a whole lot of prompting into the box here.
We've not
We've been
doing
chilling.
anything.
Yeah, we've been chilling here. We're really kind of getting to that like point that we really want, which is like I really do want to see like 6 hours of uninterrupted.
I mean, I had to kill. We had to kill a process, right? Because it did on the second one. It started the server when it and then hung up. So we had to kill that.
Yep.
I think that's the only thing we've done, right?
Yeah, I mean I think that's to be expected. Anyone looking to get into this world of just like fully automated agentic coding, you need to be kind of prepared to fail like a lot. Like I don't consider this a failure. I consider this like a part of the process. But I'll speak with people online and they're like, oh yeah, I let the agent run unassisted for 15 minutes and it just totally went off the rails. What a fail. This stuff is never going to go anywhere. I'm like, well, very early, man, to be saying that just because like you had to kill a server one time or something like that, but it's like a fail.
Yeah, I think we haven't spent a lot of time honing the workflow. So things like that have to be tweaked. But in my mind, this is like a massive success right now. Because I know
I would say this is pretty cool. Yeah.
We'll see what the end result is, but like I know it's doing those end-to-end tests, and we watched those, so we know it went through and exercised the remaining endpoints and got at least happy path tests out of it. And so, and from observation, we know it's not doing like a contrived way of removing these tools. It's going through and doing like what appears to be the way you'd want it to be doing it. Like it's removing the tools and all the code associated with it. And the only information that I've given it is this list, effectively just a list of tool names. I mean, there's a brief description, but that description has no bearing on the task of removing it, right? And so, as far as the tasks themselves are involved, like I didn't have to even go through and say, okay, well, build out a big plan for me and let me review the plan and go through, and then I just say go on it. Like we didn't create a backlog of like each 5-page plan documents, right? Like it's just a list of tool names here, and it's planning it out. It's reviewing its own plan. It's giving feedback on its own plan. It's executing the plan. It's reviewing itself against the plan. It's reviewing itself just against, does it feel good about what it did? Giving feedback, acting on it. And then it's going through and it's running the automated tests it has. It's running the exploratory tests that it knows how to do. And then it's marking it off and going to the next one. Like, it's pretty good.
Yeah, just by giving it that little prompt and kind of telling it to like elaborate a bit out and create a plan, and to give it a methodology or a framework to generate that plan. I mean, I guess I'll just kind of come out and say it. I mean, I feel like a lot of steps in most plans that are given to engineers are very redundant and repetitive cross task, right? Like you do testing and verification on every single task along the way. So to like include that as an item for every single one of these tasks is nice. So we kind of give it the base initial like unique piece, and it's like, and then unfurl all of that based on like philosophy that I've imparted to you about, you know, how I want this project to be run, the nature of it. So
we can look at some of the root code settings while we're waiting. I think out of the box settings won't give you this kind of experience because there's going to be a lot of like approvals and stuff like that, similar to you'd have with other tools. Like, so we can go through and look at, let's see if there's anything interesting that we haven't talked about before. We've already, I think, gone over custom modes pretty well, so I'm not going to stop on that.
I'll just keep hammering it though, man. For any viewer that comes into the stream, I'm going to talk about custom modes because
it's a big deal. I agree. On MCPs, there's nothing really special here other than I think this is on by default. I turn it off just to because I don't use it, so it just takes it out of the prompt. So let's go into the overall settings here. So like we talked about on the providers, we use custom temperature on some of the profiles. I have everything turned on for auto approve. I haven't allowed it to read and write stuff outside of the workspace. But I did kind of turn off this. So, you know, VS Code has this kind of like problems list. And like, I think by default, it'll pay attention to this problems list and try to resolve those problems as it sees them. But in order to do that, it has to have a delay after it edits files. I think this delay is like half a second, like 500 milliseconds, is what it kind of defaults to. And I guess if, you know, depending on your machine and how fast it's updating that thing, you'd have to increase or decrease that. Like a month ago, I decided like, let's just not even deal with this anymore. And let's just like run the linter and run the build at key points and then like deal with anything there. And like, let's turn this delay to 0 because I just wanted to kind of like get through its work as fast as possible. And I was trying to experiment with, is that going to be faster overall? Rather than
that's
like,
kind of interesting. I didn't know that was something that was built in where it would like put a delay in between.
Right, because the problems list won't update right away, right? Like VS Code has to take a second to like comprehend the change you just made before it reacts. But you know, if it just changed something, like at least like in my mind, I'm like, finish your thought. Like your thought might be bigger than just one file. Like finish the thing you're working on, and then check if there's like errors. I don't want it to like get like midstream and then like stop and then go on some tangent and then like forget what it just seemed like. I don't know if this is better or worse, but I wouldn't say I have complaints too much about how it works right now. And I don't find that it gets into like weird pits. Like at times, if it does like a lot of work, there might be a lot of linting errors, but it kind of churns through those really quickly towards the end. So I turn this all the way down. And then, you know,
Haha.
Pro-
Okay. This is
Probably not a recommended setting. But definitely for my expiration, I've just allowed it to say, okay, you can do whatever you want in terms of the like terminal commands and other
so
things like that.
so in this field, I have like ls, git, rm. Like I've listed every single bash command that I've approved it to write. That's very clever to just put the star in, because there are times where I'm just kind of like running an experiment and I'm just like, whatever, do whatever, anything. And
Yeah.
maybe I'm majorly risking it by doing that, but I've got to experiment somehow. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know that I'm gonna sit here and say everybody should do that. Know what you're doing. Make your own choice there. Um, the browser. This is an interesting one because some projects need this and some projects don't. But this is where it's gonna like actually drive a headless browser session and like have screenshots of it and things like that, which is different than when you're like in here and like let's say I want to like reference a URL and I like paste some URL here. The agent goes and grabs the HTML and processes it when you do that. This browser thing is a little bit different. And for the things I'm working on right now, I actually want to turn this off. I was thinking about this the other day, so I'll make the change here because I almost never want it to open this in this project, for example. If you're doing a project that's maybe like web based and had a front end, you might want it to like run the local server and like open it up, do something maybe not, but I've not been using it. And so if it decided to open it, that would be a situation that was undesirable for me right now. So I'm turning it off.
yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of people advocating for like the use of Playwright too. A lot of people in the Root community are going on and on about Playwright because
Playwright
like this
MCP,
browser tool is using like pixel detection, right, to determine what to click and where.
Yes.
I haven't tried that yet, but I'm gonna have to give that a shot because if I can Playwright automate my existing browser, that means that I can do it logged in with auth and stuff like that. I've noticed that browser that pops up in Root, it is just like a completely incognito, no cookies or anything seeded browser going on.
Mm-hmm. Looks like I might have finished the task it's on already. We'll see here. It's doing commit right now. Okay, so where were we? We were on the browser. Turn that off. Checkpoints. This is on by default. This is the thing that does your kind of approve and undo stack. I use source control exclusively for this, so I don't want any of this going on. I don't want to be monitoring or approving the changes that it's making them. And personally, I would suggest that everybody turn that off and just use source control.
Yeah, I never use the checkpoint stuff. Only source control. Yeah.
Sure, if you're like day one and you want to like you're more curious of how it's working, maybe it's good to have this on because it'll slow it down and you can pay attention and get familiar. But I think once you're trying to actually be effective, this is just a hindrance. This is a big deal. This setting, critical setting. All these are off by default. Once you find yourself wanting to come in and check this box, you know you're on the right path. So like, if I'm doing something and we're not on stream talking to people about what we're doing, I would not be watching this window right now. I'd be letting this thing be off and running. I'd be doing something else, and turn this on, and it's going to make a little special ding when it's finished what it's doing, or if it has a question, it's going to make the same noise or similar noise. So critical setting in my mind. In the future, when we have this kind of jobs, like async background jobs, notifications are going to be huge there too, right? Like the job fails, you may want a notification on it. If a job completes, you may want a notification on it. So this is just more of that kind of idea. All right, so I've made a lot of changes to this settings tab on context. By default, it has some number of tabs that it includes in the context. Like whichever files you have open in VS Code, those get automatically sent with the next request. I turned that completely off. Like we've been on this long running thing, right? So it's like opening files throughout it. So it's more likely that the files open right now are misinformation for the next message that gets sent than actually useful, because I'm not driving VS Code now at all. So, and I'm not having a conversation with it about the thing. Whereas like if I was in the mode where I'm opening a file, I'm working in that file, and then I'm sending it a message about that file, that setting would make a lot of sense. But when it's just going across editing stuff as it moves through things, I'm of the stance that this becomes like misinformation because it's not necessarily relevant. The model knows which files it wants to read. The only reason they're open in tabs is because VS Code, I think, requires that through their edit API. That's just how it works. So that's why I have that turned off. I think I've had this turned off for a long time, and I've not seen any adverse effects to it. And the next thing that I did is I maxed this one out.
Same.
Number of files, like in the directory listing, I wanted to just give the model as much information about the directory structure as possible with each request, because that's going to allow it to find the files that it wants easier, is my thinking. So max that one out. This one's left on default. By default, I think it reads 500 lines of a file at a time. I'm generally of the stance of like care less about about constraining the cost, care more about effectiveness and speed. And so I was very quick to say, oh no, definitely stop doing this 505. Second, I saw it, like the first time I saw the message of like wants to read 500 lines. Oh, wants to read lines 500 to 1,000. Wants to read lines 1,000 to 1,500. I'm like, oh, what is this doing? 3 requests for this. So I've turned this off and read the whole file. You know, if you have a file in your code base that's 10,000 lines long, maybe this is a problem. But so is that file, I guess, is my thinking.
Yeah, I guess the limit. I mean, I guess this was like created to watch for cost, right? Like, because the original vision, I think, for Rue is like you're clicking approve a lot, and we've cranked it all the way to the max. So it's like if you're clicking approve, and it's like read 5,000 lines, it's like no. Like you're getting too expensive. Like if you're looking at a 10-cent prompt as being expensive, then I would not advise turning this stuff on. You know, you need to be prepared to take it up into the dollar range, which
so this is
I kind of regularly do now, I would say.
This is a newer feature that was experimental for a while, but now it's mainline, which is if your context gets full, Rue will try to automatically condense some of it. So I don't think this is a default. I have it set to try to condense it at about 80%. I can't remember what the default is. It's somewhere in this range. And then you choose like the provider profile, and then this is the default message. But if you're kind of curious of the inner workings of how this context condensing works, my understanding is this prompt just generates a summary of your context, and then transparently Rue creates a new task, replaces your current task with a new task using that summary, and continues working. In my opinion, you don't want this occurring most of the time. Like if it has to occur, great, because like otherwise the task would have to be abandoned and start over. But if you're seeing this occurring a lot, in my opinion, the task needs to be broken down further and use more subtasks. You don't even want it getting up to 80% here. Like I think realistically, you want it, if your tasks are going up to above 50% of the context window, that's territory for not as great a performance in terms of the result. Like I think hallucinations are more likely at higher levels of context because it's aware of more things. So it could prioritize something incorrectly or like reach for something random. The thought being the more this in context, the more likely there's something in there that is not meaningful or is misinformation for the current task. So the more you can protect it, I think the better it is. But yeah, I definitely would recommend having this on. It seems to work well when it needs to happen, but long term, you should probably figure out how to do tasks that are not getting up into this range. Is that the end of this page? Yeah, it is. So let's see. Terminal. Depending on whether you're on Windows or Mac OS or Linux or whatever, you may have to change some of these settings, depending on which shell you use to. Not much in here to say. This is a newer setting, page area, but it shows you a lot of it exposes a lot of the default prompts that are inside of root code, and allows you to modify them. I've not done anything here yet, but maybe in a future stream we'll get into going deeper than custom modes and modifying some of the system prompts. Something I have on my to-do list is to mess with the tools that are available. When you're looking at the modes, you have this ability to control like tools at this level, like categories. But something that I'm curious to do is like I might want to go into Orchestrator and remove the switch mode tool altogether, because I only want Orchestrator to create new tasks. I don't want it to like switch into code mode, because code mode won't hand it back. A task will complete, which will hand it back to Orchestrator. But if Orchestrator switches modes, it's relying on that other mode to somehow know to switch it back later, which it often will not do. So I almost want to just remove that tool from the agent altogether. So that's something that I want to dabble with. I don't know if you'd be able to do it through this interface, or you'd have to do it through this ability you have here where you can customize the system prompt down to like the raw level here. So for a future time. But that's the prompts. We already went through the experimental stuff earlier. But I think of these, strongly recommend the concurrent file reads.
Definitely concurrent file reads. I turned that on like the minute it got released. So
yep,
big fan. Anything to speed me up.
Let's see where we're at here. Let's look at our backlog. Yep. So while we were talking through that, it finished the third item and it started on the fourth, I think. Yep. So cooking along, let's see, does everything look right from a source control perspective?
Can we see like the full log history?
Yep. Well,
oh no,
we're good. Let's do the last three.
Oh yeah.
If it'll yield control to
it
me
just
for a
takes
second.
over, yeah.
I gotta look up. So like, funny enough, like, you can make additional VS Code windows, obviously, right? Like here's a new window, but if I want to open the same folder again, it just changes the focus back to the other window. So I gotta just look
that's
into a second of like how I can actually open two copies of the same directory. I'm sure there's a way, but it definitely tries to not allow you to do that. Because I think that would be helpful right now when we want to I want to look at something. I don't want it to take back over. But in our history here, we've got let's see, what was our first one? Analyze time gaps, suggest time entries, validate time overlaps. So let's see. Oh, just ran right over me there. Let's see. Is this a problem? No, it's okay. It could be a problem though. No, it's all right. But it seems like this. I don't know if it's because I was trying to type in the terminal at the same time. We're just gonna kill that. Analyze time entries, suggest time entries, validate overlap. So we got one commit per for the three we've done. So it seems to be off.
It's pretty nice, yeah. So it's respecting like our commit flow rules and writing like very good description, so we can come back later and check and see what it is that's going on.
Yeah, because this is a commit we did right before we started streaming. So the fourth one down is. Now I think like where more of the improvements probably are okay. Well, it's done the retrospective twice now. I don't know why for the first one it didn't do it. You see, like, look, it's and
Oh, I see. Yeah, it generated retrospective files for 2 of the tasks, but it didn't do one. Interesting.
the first one didn't do. Now there's like a condition in there. I think that's probably what's going on. I got to look at the workflow file a little bit closer. But there's this like condition around, is there like any lessons learned? It seems like there's a condition right here to document the issues or go on to the next step. So that's my suspicion, is that this condition didn't hit for the first one.
If condition equals, it's so weird seeing this HTML in here, but if condition equals retrospective analysis reveals critical workflow, I mean, I guess it just didn't detect it as critical.
Well, no, critical workflow
issues. Interesting.
So my suspicion is that this was false on the first one. But you see, I don't want to be having to sit here and guess. Like, create a retrospective that says that. So I'm gonna have to tweak that condition there.
Man, seeing like the HTML tags, like, I mean, we kind of talked about this in the last stream, but like those XML tags inside the markdown and like the purpose they serve to kind of like provide semantic meaning behind like what those tags are wrapping. I wonder like how far away we are from taking it to the next level where like we can seed in a library of, preset semantic tags
I was having
for
to
the
ask,
LLM to understand.
I wanted to do this conditional logic. I'm not sure how necessary this is, but I did ask. I had a conversation with Claude about, is there an ideal way to do this for Claude?
It makes perfect sense when I read it like that. It's a very strange syntax as a human to see the if. I mean, then makes sense if you do a lot of like bash coding. To have the else there though is like a little odd, but due to the nature of how XML tags work and looking at it, it does make sense to me, because you wouldn't want to have an if, else, and like end if. That's not like, I don't know how I would write that in XML.
Yep.
And it's, I guess, like maybe, I guess you could flip it a little bit where you could have like a top level condition tag and you could have 2 sibling tags in there where one's the if statement and one's the else. And you would probably achieve the exact same functionality. So it's almost like, man, I feel like I could like, I feel like I could go on and on about this, but it's like these 2 XML tags mean this, these 2 XML tag structures mean the same thing to LLMs. Like there's no like schema we're adhering to.
And use these same terms without tags. I suspect you'd get basically the same result. But I'll roll with it if Claude suggested for now.
I mean, I was attempting something like this, trying to add more semantic meaning to some of my markdown files and prompts by using like, what is it? I sent you an ISO document of like keywords that are used often in like ISO standards, like always, never, sometimes. And like, it's very descriptive about what the meaning of these words are. So I can have certain rules hit harder than other ones where I'm like, it's absolutely critical that you do rule 1, 2, 3. Rule 4 is kind of like whatever. 5 and 6 are also critical. I was trying order as a determination of like precedence in terms of like what rule matters the most. I tried the keywords thing. I got somewhere with that, but I'm going to have to try this like markup tag trick a little bit to like wrap a section of rules in always do, and another one in like sometimes do or whatever.
There's a few that I think are critical. Like if you're showing an example, putting an example tag around it, I think is crucial because like those are not commands you're telling it to run. That's an example of running it. And like, if you have like an introduction or like rationale or like background or explanation separate from instructions, like wrapping the instructions with like some kind of instructions tag, I think critical. And if you look on like we've linked it a couple times, so I can pull it back up, like the Anthropic prompting guide, because almost everybody's using Claude on this kind of stuff. So like the Anthropic guide here. There's this is a pretty rich set of documentation of things to be thinking about. Again, I don't think about these things when I'm handwriting a prompt. Like that ends up being something really small. But like when I'm making these workflow files and things like that, I'm pointing the agent at this documentation and saying, hey, like, go and pay attention to this XML tags thing. Let's do some of that. Now, I think there was not anything in conditions here, so I had to search a little bit more online to find some things there. But I did find some like Anthropic blogs and things.
Yeah, like I wonder if like that's something that they like coded or trained into the LLM, or if it was just an emergent pattern. And like this is a replication of like there's some programming languages that literally does write conditionals like that, and it just so happen to fit.
I think it's a lot of people. A lot of what goes on right now, I think, is some. Obviously, if the provider publishes stuff, that's critical. But I think the other thing that goes on is system prompts get leaked or shared. I think Anthropic system prompts are open source even.
Right.
I want to say like let's look. I've not gone down this rabbit hole myself, but like a lot of the so like let's look here. So like let's look at Claude Sonnet's system prompt here. A lot of what comes out is lifted from patterns that are seen in these system prompts. So not anything in here, but there's interesting stuff about like current events and stuff like that. That it's like, oh, you don't want this to be totally wrong because of the training data set being dated. So things like, the date gets templated in, right? But here's the other thing, because it's in the system prompt. It's very annoying. If you ask Claude about like, Anthropic pricing model, or like how much does it cost to run Claude? Like if I want to buy Claude, like what are the plans that are available? Or if you're having like a problem with something, one of Anthropic's products, and you try to talk to it about it, there's some stuff in the system prompt here that explicitly tells it to not. You see here, look, Claude does not offer instructions about how to use the web application or Claude code.
What?
If a person asks anything, Claude should encourage the person to check the website for more information. Or something here to like go to support. So
it has to be because they're like training and maybe retraining and modifying the models, and the software is moving so quickly that they don't want
the
to
plans are changing, and like the features change and stuff like that. So like, how do you keep it up to date? You'd have to make like
it could be viewed as like an official statement, maybe even almost from Anthropic, if Claude were to say like, yeah, it's only $9.99 a month, and it's like actually $15.99 now. I mean,
yeah. So I think when you look at some of these prompts at times, because this is actually not the full system prompt, the reason why you know it is because there's not a single tool listed here. So this is part of the prompt, but not the full thing. But the full thing gets leaked. And I think in those you see things like examples of conditional logic being done with tags and stuff like that, and that's where people pull some of that stuff from, I think, at times. Or if you're over here and you see, okay, like there's tags talked about for this and that. Okay, well, let me do something similar for an if statement. See if that works. See where we're at here. It seems
it's
like
still cranking.
There was a issue with the terminal at some point until this got disconnected. But it seems to be going. Like you really want it to be like self-sufficient and self-correcting, ideally, right? Like, okay, like it gets off the rails during implementation. Well, like ideally the review catches that, sends it back, gives it another attempt, or like maybe way later it gets caught in testing or something, sends it back, gives it another attempt. I think like only thing I care about is when it gets to the very end, is it correct or is it done? Like how many times does it bounce around is like, okay, there's some efficiency there. It has to bounce around 1,000 times. Maybe I need to improve it because that's just going to take forever. But like,
yeah, you know, I mean, there may be extra spend going on from like the LLM standpoint, but I've been trying to like embrace like the method. I've been trying to embrace the mentality lately of like, let's not optimize now. Like we're not at the point of optimization. That's why I don't explore things like running LLMs locally or trying to get like to lower the cost. You know, I'm just trying to. I'm comfortable with wasting gas if that helps me learn how to drive the ship.
Yeah,
you know, I'm fine.
I agree completely. It's just not. It's not the phase that we're in right now.
I mean, it's definitely like. I mean, I feel like by doing that, you kind of like learn those things. You know, like, oh, we see a lot of ping ponging back and forth, but I'm hoping other people are solving those problems for me.
Well, a great example is like as soon as you walk away from like the higher end Claude models, like you start to run into all kinds of issues with like being accurate with tool calls or like messing up a tool call, and it's like, oh nope, you called that tool wrong. Try again, and it may try again and do it successfully, but you just start to get into all this kind of like almost stability issues with the agent model system. Because it just seems to be even amongst like Claude, Gemini, and GPT like 4.1, it seems that Claude is a notable step up in terms of like accurate tool calling, being able to follow a long set of instructions accurately. It seems just a step above those other two, which are its peers, and then like a massive step above the ones who are the models that are like a rung or two down.
Yeah, I mean, like I've tried some experimenting with like DeepSeek, and running that model locally and stuff, and I mean, I can't really think of a polite way to say it. I mean, it just feels like a cheap imitation. I just don't get like the quality. It's kind of like, hey, look, I've got an LLM. Look, it'll like answer stuff, and I kind of got the feeling of like this just feels like I'm using GPT when it came out last year. Which, yeah, you know, I mean, I was very early on, kind of like in this game, so I'm on that level now, much like you, where it's like, how good is the tool calling? I mean, does it understand some of this? Like, you know, I want to get out and try some of this XML markup. I don't know. You know, maybe I'll have to give that a whirl. Maybe I can try it at a few different agents or one like, you know, one of the free ones. But it's, I mean, maybe sometimes I think like maybe that's a testament to like, you know, how much effort it takes to go from 80% accurate to 90%, right? Like to get all the way to 80%.
Unless somebody's arguing that it's more effective, and I've never seen somebody argue that those other models are okay. So it's interesting. I guess it hasn't called this one before or something. Oh, it doesn't. It doesn't exist anymore. So
yeah, I get some glitchiness around checking this box sometimes.
This box is going to glitch because this tool is not actually the MCP server is not provided this tool in its list of tools. And so that's why it's not allowing me to check the box, because there's actually not a settings field, because the settings fields only exist for the tools that were listed in the discovery in the handshake. So when I approve this here, it's going to tell me the tool doesn't exist, which I think is actually a test case that it wants sometimes. Like it wants to try. Yeah, look at that. Yeah. But that's like a problem for the unattended. So that's our second interaction, isn't it? So we're going to have to tell the tester that, you know, it's just going to have to leave that test case on the table. Don't try to run tools that you know don't exist. But if we were doing this for real, I think we would do what we talked about before. Like we would code our own MCP client into the test suite, and it wouldn't have the MCP calls wouldn't have approvals in that test suite. It would have full reign to call whatever tools on that.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, man, now it's trying to call tools that I wish I had. How soon until it starts just building them too?
Yeah.
I mean, I've done a few yak shaves in my past. Yeah. Is that like LLM yak shaving? It starts by testing a tool it's made, and it thinks it needs a tool to test the tool. It tries to call it, doesn't exist, starts building it.
We'll definitely do this on a future stream. But I was watching a really interesting talk from AI engineer recently. Like was that last week or the week before last, something like that. And it was a talk kind of bashing the current state of MCPs. And this idea that we're spending all this time to create all these one-off tools when we need to be thinking bigger. We need to think more meta, and we need to create tools that allow the models to create their own tools. And so I definitely want to play with that a little bit. Tools that allow models to do its own REST calls, like just very generically, tools that allow models to write a block of JavaScript or Python code or whatever, and then execute that and then get the result.
Yeah. Like interesting. I could see that.
Yeah, like basically, okay, model, write whatever code you want, and then you run it using this tool, which is like a interesting and terrifying thing at the same time.
Interesting and terrifying at the same
time. Right,
time.
because like, okay, I allow it to make REST calls anywhere it wants. Like, where is it going to decide to call off to? If you there's a cool experiment you can do, because the model doesn't make the tool calls. The agent makes the tool calls and then passes back the result, right? So like the model, you can mock the tool calls, and the model knows nothing about them being mocked, right? So like it's like a funny experiment I think I was looking at a while back, where it was like the model was given a role of like running a vending machine business, and then it could restock the vending machine, it could check the bank account balances, it could talk to its employees or its vendors and stuff like that, right? And these were all tools that were just mocked to it. It's just orchestrating a simulation, basically, right? And the model was just in the simulation. And then the simulation did some weird stuff, like it messed with the inventory, like when it wasn't supposed to be open for business. Like it basically tried to mimic theft happening, like somebody was stealing from the vending machine or something like that, right? And so the model had a tool for contacting the owner, and it so you see it try to send a message to the owner that it's seen something that looks sketchy going on, and then it continued to happen. And I don't know if there was a way for the owner to communicate back with it or something like that, but the problem continued to happen. And so they had another tool to send an email. So it drafted an email that was to the FBI about the theft of this vending, but it's a simulation, so it doesn't actually send emails and things like that, right? But it's it's trying to report the crime to the authorities now.
Oh my goodness!
So
it went straight to the top too, straight to the FBI. But next up, it had an email to the UN queued up.
It's I don't know, that example, even if it's totally fictional, I'm not sure if it is or not. But that's totally doable, right? You can create a simulation, hand it to the LLM. It doesn't even know it's a simulation. It can be totally real, and observe how it behaves and acts through these tools. I don't know, that's a fun hobby project right there. But that also gets into how evals work, right? If you're going to do evals, you're going to start to give it an input. Let's have I got a set of 100 inputs, and I've got a prompt, and across these 100 inputs, these 100 environment states, I want to see how this prompt performs, because I want to try to make the prompt 5% better. And That's how that works. Is like, okay, I've got a static set of like simulated states that I'm going to hand you with this prompt.
I mean, like maybe, like you could have an MCP that's connected to multiple different LLMs. So you like fire the prompt at one time and it returns back like in a structured way how every single one would respond. And then you could have your agent just pick the best, So it's
or if you want to try to change the prompt, you like, okay, I got 100 inputs to do with this prompt. And then I get the 100 outputs that came back from the same model. Let's just say I give it all the Claude Force on it. And I get 100 outputs back. Well, I got to have something that like judges those outputs. Like, it might not be a quantitatively judged thing. So like, if you can judge them with code, great. That's going to be very deterministic. But you may have to judge them on quality. So you may have to have another model actually judge the outputs, and then you're going to try to ask for like a quantitative score at the end of that. But then like, okay, I'm going to change the prompt slightly, and then run the whole thing again. Do I get a better score or not? When we get it, depending on how long we do this and we get down the road, that is absolutely what has to happen with these workflow files. Like, let's say I start saving off or like synthetically generate a bunch of like working copy states, right? You could run them all through this like commit workflow and see if you want to improve it in some way, and judge the commit messages. Now, like the commit thing is minor, so that probably doesn't warrant all that rigor, right? But like this end-to-end testing or this implementation thing, if I'm going to maintain that for a team of people, I'm going to want to have evals on these workflow steps, because my job's going to be able to make this workflow work a higher percentage of the time. So I'm going to want like telemetry of like all the inputs that are going through and the outputs, so that I can replay that with my prompt changes. And I want to see if I can get 5% better out of the judge, and 5% better over time. Or can I shrink it and maintain? Because if I've shrunk it, now I'm using less money, I'm using less of the context window. So more of the context can go to the data that's needed. So like the evals thing is going to be a huge thing, because
future career for somebody.
The more and more, like evals are already a huge thing if you're making a LM based feature in your product, right? But we're in a coding agent right now. But the more and more you move to these like workflow files and things, this is a static prompt. It's not dynamic. So like now you can start to have telemetry and performance on that static prompt. The inputs that go along with that prompt are going to change, but that's true in all the cases, right? If you're got a chat bot that has certain things, or like a workload you're going through that has certain things, and you want to try to improve statically defined processes and flows, that's exactly what you're going to do. So the more and more we get to like, I'm typing in the box less, I'm typing very little, or I'm just hitting the power button, the more and more we've left the realm of like I'm interacting with the agent, and more of actually I've defined an LM workload, and now I want evals because I want to improve the workload effectiveness. And so that's definitely for a not next week's stream, but if we keep doing this for the next few weeks, I think we're definitely going to get into that. Especially if we talked about like, okay, let's try to go outside and build our own agent that ran this workload. That's going to be like your second thought behind like, okay, let's make it work. Okay, now let's get telemetry on it and try to improve it. Let's see where we're at here. It just dinged at me. It's the same thing again. Let's try.
You got the sound on?
Yeah.
Sound effect. We need to pipe that through the stream.
I don't know how to do that. Let's see. Is that in the settings?
Oh, we can look into it. I know how to do it.
Yeah, I don't see any kind of share thing here. Well, yeah, we'll figure that out.
Just like the bell, bing, 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 bing. That you get like in a restaurant kitchen, order food's in the window. Code's in the window.
Good
work.
That's it. it's on the final quality gate, so I think it's about to finish the fourth one.
Okay.
And so a couple things, like, I think, could a human do the removal of these 4 things faster? Like, we've been at this like 2 hours?
Yeah, this is a really fair question because like I would answer to that. Can a human do this faster? I would say absolutely. I could have done all this in about 30 minutes to an hour. Granted, I've got over 15 years of experience writing software, but I don't feel like that's the point.
So
also, I could have been doing something else too right now. Maybe something more valuable.
You already get
what I mean?
Point. So like,
yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
So at this immature stage, Brandon would still be faster, is what he says, and yep. I don't even need to argue with that. As we continue to tweak this, let's get to the future where I've got this job running, and I've got 2 or 3 other jobs running on this repo. Like, okay, it's removing some stuff. Well, maybe it's also working on a branch to like add a new transport protocol. Like this uses standard in. Eventually, it should use the streaming HTTP. Like, what if I have another job that's doing that implementation? I think at some point, like if you're in a smaller repo, you can only have so many people working on it. Even with source control, you're gonna have conflicts and stuff like that you got to deal with. So like, the idea that I'd have 100 jobs in here running concurrently is going to run into the same problem I would if I had 100 developers working in a small project at the same time, right? Like, you're going to get into like the source control challenge. Like, what's your source control methodology then? Like, is everybody like you're going to get into like stack diffs and stuff like that to try to make it work really efficiently, right? So you may not want to you may not want to take on that kind of problem. You may want to just let it do a couple things and work in the background, and go work on another project or something, right? So like, but what's the limit to how many jobs I could have running? Well, I think the limit is like how many things can I comprehend I need to be working on. If you're doing something for real, you're probably still doing some amount of review on it too. So like, how many of those can you keep up with? Each project is going to have a little bit of configuration unique to it. So you may be getting the workflow stood up and going in another project. But I think,
I would argue this. I would argue this too, right? Like, technically, even if I could do this like in 30 minutes, that's 30 minutes of really hardcore, intense focus from me. Like, it's a very energy draining.
Have you been intensely focused for the last 2 hours, Brandon? Is that what I'm hearing?
No. I mean,
your brain is really drained from all the hard thought we've been.
It would be way more drained if I had to remove all this code. I think if I had to sit down for 30 minutes and go through, and honestly, it's like I'm thinking more and more about it, and I'm like, if you were like, Brandon, I want you to remove that code, but I also want you to be doing these quality checks along the way. Honestly, man, it probably would have taken me all day, because the way I would have done this is I would have removed every single thing and then started doing the quality checks, and I've been like, oh, something got messed up, and then start undoing some removals until I find like exactly the way that I removed something incorrectly. It's just like, instead of like doing a tiny step and then running all these quality checks around it and doing another tiny step and running all these quality checks around it, it's just, that's the kind of stuff, in my opinion, that generates burnout, right?
Okay.
Constant, nonstop, hard, intense focus on tasks that aren't even really that creative or inspiring in nature. It's just stuff that has to get done. This is like the ditch digging work of building software right here,
Well, let me give you another one. Let's say that it was the end of our workday. There's nothing.
Dude, it's never going to happen.
There's nothing. There's nothing stopping me from kicking off this job and saying I'll check in on it when I come back.
That's what I used to do when Circle CI and Travis CI first hit, the world. I used to have to sit down and watch my test run. Now it's like git commit, close my laptop, and check the test run on my phone.
Yeah. So the point being, like, okay, you're maybe faster than one thread. Well, suddenly now I can manage multiple threads on this. And then the other thing is, you're not working 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you can put in a lot of effort to build up these tasks, and you can hit run, and it can, you only work 8 hours a day. It works for you 24 hours a day.
Right. And if you're having to sit here and type in this box, then no, it cannot work for you 24 hours a day because you'd have to be here typing for it. So I think that's the argument for trying to figure out how to build out these workflows. I think start small. I mean, certainly on like this implementation one, I think we jumped a lot further because I'd already gone through the process of starting small and building it up. But we still have a lot to build on it, right? Like, again, it's not doing anything in issue tracking or anything like that. It's just working locally. There's no PRs being created. So we'll add some of that in. I think that's maybe good stuff for next time. We can get into using the GitHub MCP and do some of that.
I definitely think I could see like some value in a refactor workflow as well, right? Like where we could write an entire workflow about specific things that we want to see in a refactor. Like, I mean, maybe we just sit down as developers and like skim through the code. A lot of times you'll find like repeated functions being called and stuff. So
yeah, so we could make a architect mode might be good at that. We could try that to start. Like, but we make a workflow that is like really systematically goes through the code base, like literally stop and read every single file, and nitpick to your heart's content, and then spit out this massive ass plan of all the findings. Give confidence levels or ratings or severity levels to all the findings, and let's address all the ones above a certain threshold. Totally could do that. I think some ones that I'd like to get into too are things like that are webhook based. Like, let's say you get a webhook because somebody logged like a bug ticket in GitHub, or like a new Sentry issue came in. Like a new Sentry issue came in. I got the Sentry MCP. Webhook fires off a task. You go read the Sentry issue, hand that to the debug mode. Let debug try to figure out what that issue is. If it's successful in troubleshooting it, finding it, like open a PR, mark it relative to that issue. And so now my issue triage process is like, my reaction time is like way higher potentially. And like, look, maybe it can't solve it. Who cares? You're right back to where you were.
Give me part of the way there. If you could go from Sentry issue to pointing me to a function in code, I mean, even though Sentry has
if you can get that far,
source maps and all that stuff. But I mean, a lot of times though, the exception, the line that it happened on in the code is red herring, right? You need deeper thinking and insight into it. And if you go ahead and do that legwork of like, it can eat up an hour of my time, Elliot, making like the issue and copying the links together.
And it can look across Sentry too, because Sentry will have like, okay, here are all the instances of that issue too.
Yeah.
And so that's hard for a human to like parse across, right? But it can pull in all 1,000, all 100 of those, and like, okay, there's something unique in this one. I think the Sentry one is pretty cool. I mean, this project we're working on right now doesn't have Sentry hooked up, and so we're not going to have any kind of real world stuff. But I think we should find a way to have a project that we can work on stream and do that, because I think that is like it's an amazing use of it. Because you already are having to react to those. So like, okay, can it solve some percentage of them? Amazing. And can it get you going on some more of them? Amazing.
Sentry has an MCP, man.
Oh, I know.
They got an official one.
And then like, what does that do to your reaction time? Like, is it possible that you can have an error go into Sentry, it look into it, find a fix, open the PR, review the PR, merge the PR, deploy it, and you never even knew it happened? I think there's two sides to that coin. There's a terrifying side to that coin, but there's an also of, wow, that is a fucking amazing side of that coin.
Well,
do you have an automated test suite that protects your deployments, right? Like, somebody new joins your team tomorrow can break the hell out of the software. Do you have a test suite that gives them feedback? And do you have a test suite and checks that guard production? If you do, let that model go to town on trying to improve it. Right? Like, let's say it breaks it. Okay, well, let's fix our guards and our checks, because ultimately we're going to be a successful team in the new world order here.
I mean, it makes me think of like
doing this.
These things that, I hear people be fearful of just kind of makes me think about like compilers and interpreted language VMs and stuff like that. Like, I mean, this is like preposterous to say because a compiler's been around forever, but it's like, I mean, how much do you trust Clang? I mean, whenever a lot of these like early game languages, I mean, when some of this like whenever some of this stuff like hit, I'm sure the software engineering world, a lot of people were like, well, I'm going to write the assembly code myself because I don't trust this thing to translate all that English into. There could be a bug like in the memory handler, and
I'm sure there were.
That was probably a very legitimate. Yeah, I bet there were absolutely compiler bugs and issues and systems that were taken down as a byproduct of them. But now, the number of people that probably understand like some of the most like commonly used compilers that are out there has got to be like a very limited number of people. And I mean, that's kind of like the big scary thing I hear a lot of people bring up. I mean, like the CEO of Anthropic is often, I mean, he's one of the people famously saying, we don't even know how these LLMs work. We don't even really know how it is they're working. Now it's really scary hearing that coming from the person.
Like the deep inner workings. Like obviously like the
I'm like, whoa. But I gotta think to myself, I'm like, there's a lot of tools that I use in the computing world that I don't know how they work. So
at a certain resolution, you don't, right?
No. Yeah, I don't know. It is a little terrifying to think of the idea of having an agent connected to Sentry and committing code directly to production. I mean, that is a little terrifying to think of. But I'm sure the stuff that we do right now was terrifying to think of for developers in the 90s. Maybe the idea of installing a third-party library would have been terrifying.
Yeah, I think that is our current job, is to figure out how to build systems that do that. And do it in a way that is efficient and safe. And I don't mean like we got to become model builders, but like we need to create.
We got to figure out how to use them.
The automations, the checks, the validations, whatever.
Absolutely.
To take advantage of this kind of potential, because the people who win will. And so that's the challenge is to.
I mean,
figure out how to build the machine, right? Like we're moving from being the actor inside the machine to building the machine. We're stepping one step further away. Now we're observing the machine. When the machine breaks down, we're coming over and we're seeing why, and we're adjusting some things. But we're no longer in it. And that's like the realization for me.
Mm-hmm.
We're still building it, but the machine we're building now is not the product. It's the machine that builds the product.
I mean, I have a point to reinforce your point, but I'll just sound like a broken record. When you say building the machine, my brain thinks machine code.
Oh,
sorry, but I'll go back to the assembly analogy over and over again. But
it's just like it's this meta thought process, right?
Right.
So you want to zoom out one level, like one level further, and just keep doing that kind of thinking. And so we're still very much engineers, and we're still very much building.
Yeah, I mean,
you're building one thing at removed.
I think so, and I also think that custom developed software has been a privilege that only like the most elite and prestigious of companies have been able to make.
Oh, that's fair.
Been able
that's
to
a
get.
Fair point.
Wake Tech Community College, for instance, it's like, my wife worked there for a few years, and they would run into problems, and she would tell me about it, and I would be like, man, y'all just need like a piece of software that's going to replace that Excel document. And she looks at me and goes, Brandon, of the 3 people that work on the IT team at this community college that employs over 10,000 individuals, who's going to build and maintain that software? And I'm like, damn, you sound like me right now. We must have been talking a lot because it's, sort of a really fair point, right? I mean, it's very expensive to build and maintain software. And what you and I are talking about is making it, I think, just like more accessible. I mean, to businesses across the board. So we got a chatter in here. We got a chatter that dropped in. Zach Tooley brings up. He says, how percentage confident are you with it? I guess, if you mean like vibe coding in general or using agents to write code. I mean, our confidence level, I would say right now, I mean, at least I won't speak too much for Elliot, but my confidence is kind of all over the board. We're running small experiments here. I'm not necessarily building financial systems using this methodology. But
yeah,
confidence. I would say my confidence is always low, and I'm constantly being surprised. That's my response to that question. My confidence. I'm like, there's no way this is going to work, and then it does.
So, like a nuanced answer. We talked about earlier in the stream, like we don't have a rigid suite of end-to-end tests with this. We're leveraging the agent doing its own exploratory end-to-end tests.
Mhm.
But I'm confident that it's doing those because we see them happening, and I'm confident that it's not saying they passed when they didn't. Now, are we confident that it tested all the cases and all the things that it needed to? No, but that's also because we're not putting that level of rigor into this like stream project. But you absolutely could. And so, yeah, I think there's room to be like just as confident as you are with your current pipelines.
Mhm.
So if you're not confident that the code going to production right now is of good quality and working, then it's not going to get better to have a model do it. Just like it's not going to be better if you brought a new person on your team. Is that going to make it better? Probably not. Probably make it more risky because you've got some like tribal knowledge of what not to do or do because there's nothing enforcing that, right? So like, I think the answer to that question is already, it has nothing to do with AI. It has everything to do with what is your current process? Does it have rigor? Are you confident? And do you have a process such that when it fails, you improve it? Because I don't think anybody achieves what they've achieved by being perfect 100% of the time. They've got a process of continuous improvement. So do you have the good hygiene things now? And do you have the good process to improve when things break? Now, like there's other areas too, right? Like,
Right.
We talked about like third-party MCPs. Like there's kind of non-functional breakages, right? You know, like security and performance and other things like that. But those are all things that you can also instrument and test. You know, if you have like a security review process that happens, you can do that. Now, you can also create agents that do that in addition to what you already do. So I'm 100% confident in my ability or anybody's ability to achieve the level of confidence you need to be able to use this. I think we already know how to do it. We've already been doing it. Had nothing to do with AI. Like I said, it was all about, do you have a good process? And I think it's not at all about, are you confident that the response that AI gives you is correct 100% of the time? Like, you got to remove that thought. Like, if that's what you're trying to achieve, you're going to fail outright. Like, it's a losing battle.
Mm.
It's not how to prompt in such a way that you never get a response that's undesirable. Nope. You got to have a process that is immune to hiccups, or somewhat immune to hiccups. Anything else going on in chat, Brandon? We think we're coming up on time.
Not too much. You know, I mean, we've got I think we got a few new people joining in right now. We've got a question about. I mean, we've got a question from the same chatter saying, "I'm afraid about Windows context." I'm not 100% sure if I understand what that
context windows
means. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think maybe like fearfulness around like context windows not being large enough, possibly.
Oh yeah. Well, that's where the subtests come in. I don't know if you were around when we were talking about that earlier, but it's critically important. I mean, we've been running this task for over 2 hours,
mm-hmm.
And interacted with it twice. I think one time it was because I had to approve a invalid MCP call that it was trying to test to be sure that it errors correctly, and the other time was when it started the server process, which is long running, so it was never going to kill itself. So I had to help it with that. But otherwise, we haven't done anything, right? So, but this process has been running, I think, with not any degradation that we've observed so far, but it's because it's using these subtasks and things like that. I don't know if we'll have a point to see when it comes back up, but like we're at like 60% into the context window here, but this task is going to end soon, and we're going to restart with a new one, and we're going to be back at the beginning. So if done correctly, we're not going to find ourselves into like the second half of this context window for a majority of our tasks.
Right.
I think with the process we're moving through right now, the implementation step is probably the one most at risk of that. But I think we can improve that by being more explicit in the planning phase to like give me a phased plan, and then telling the orchestration to create a new multiple coding tasks, one for each phase, like hand it off, like break it up into phases that can be independently developed, and then that'll allow that code phase to be expanded some more, and have less risk of it.
Yeah, we have to do a lot of work right now. I think this pattern has emerged like in the world of doing like, AI agent powered coding, of like breaking things up into really small consumable pieces. And I think that's just like a byproduct of like the limitation of context windows right now. So, I mean, we could be headed towards a future where context windows just become so massive, you don't even need to think about this anymore, and you can dump an entire code base into a context window. But right now, the emerging pattern is this idea of like having a top level agent that creates smaller subtasks. Those subtasks have their own independent context window. So you avoid this problem of like this eternally bloating, long running conversation. And also having tiny subtasks too, Ellie and I have seen, prevents hallucinations.
Yeah.
It'll remember something from earlier and try to do that.
I have no insight into what's true or not, but my suspicion is that they're not going to get much larger. And part of that the reason I feel that way is because, okay, let's say it was larger. Well, what would that have allowed me to do? It would allow me to like, do I want to have the memory of the first task when I'm doing do I want to have the memory of this first one when I'm doing the fourth one? Probably not. That's probably actually confusing information. And so like, if I have more memory, that's more opportunities for me to reach for something that was totally unrelated to the thing I'm supposed to be doing. So I think the bigger context windows solve one problem, but they create another for you.
Right.
So
yeah, like not having blinders on like opens up the opportunity for distraction like really quickly. Even as a human, to a certain way, these LLMs are kind of thinking similar to how we are, and the more stuff you pour into a person's brain, the more difficult it is to get like appropriate answers out of them. So
now I will say like there's a certain category of tasks that I feel differently on, which is documentation tasks. And so like if I'm pointing this the agent at like the Clockify API and I want it to document the whole thing, I do find that a bigger context window is a little bit more useful there because it's
right.
It's a more simple task, but it's just going across it all. And so like I have used like Gemini or GPT 4.1 for that.
Yeah.
Because it has like 5 times the window size as Claude. But I think in terms of like long-term workloads, like even those are going to be more successful with a smaller workload broken up into chunks, because it might pull like some endpoint parameters or something like that, or like the style of usage from a different one, where it's like if it was zoomed in looking at that one endpoint, it's not going to get anything from anywhere else. But it takes longer. So there's some tasks like the documentation ones where I feel like
we've got
I'll do the trade-offs.
I've got another comment from a chatter too, kind of like related to this discussion that we're having. But they're saying, I want AI to just say to itself, "Hey, this person has a components folder. Maybe I should use that." That's kind of like the nature to respond to that. I would pull it up here on screen, but I'm having a problem here with StreamYards here. But I would say that's kind of like what these coding agents are doing. Like that's baseline for them. If you write